Let's get into the mindset of being at the beach. Maybe you're with your family members, your siblings, maybe some friends. Think about yourself walking towards the ocean. What do you see around you? What do you smell? What do you hear? Really take a moment to get into that mindset before we get started. Here are the supplies you'll need for this project. First, we want to draw the horizon line. Remember, the horizon line is where our sky meets our ocean. I want to have a pretty low horizon line so I have a lot of room for the sky. Using my hand, I can measure about where I want my sand line. This doesn't need to be perfectly straight, just make sure you have a lot of room for the sand. We are focusing on the executive functioning skill of working memory. As we're working on this project, keep in mind the pathway we're looking at now. I want this to look like a pathway, so I'm going to draw shapes for the grass, a triangle on the left and also a triangle on the right. Just like we talked about earlier, I want to leave a pathway, so I'm using my hand as where my pathway will be and then drawing my other triangle. For the grass, I'm just going to make small vertical strokes, about 2 or 3 in little groups. For the palm tree, I want to make sure that it's about the width of my finger, it's thicker at the bottom and then skinnier towards the top. I'm leaving space at the top of my paper for the palm, so you can use your hand to do this, or just eyeball it using my example. For the palms, I'm only going to draw a few lines, not drawing the whole shape. Later on, I'll use watercolor to draw the shape. These can look like little fireworks that are empty in the middle, or however you want to think about these curved lines, that's up to you. I'm going to add a couple more palm trees, making sure they're sort of unique and bending in different ways than my first palm tree. You can add as many palm trees as you'd like, different sizes, or add something completely different. Now, I don't like to see the horizon line through my trunk, so I'm going to take my eraser and erase that now. You can place any object in this area. It does not need to be an umbrella. If you'd like to draw an umbrella, you can follow along now. And remember, you can place this anywhere on your paper, making sure to keep in mind where an umbrella makes sense, probably in the sand and not in the sky. The grass will be covering the back of the chairs a little bit, so I'm only going to draw a couple rectangles. Remember, you can add a different object, you can add a sandcastle, you can add people, surfboards. These do not need to be chairs. This will be up to you, how you want your project to look, and what details you'll add into your sand. Remember, the pigment when you open your watercolor needs to be wet, so if you have a palette like mine, start filling your water wells to add your pigment, or just add a little bit of water to your watercolor. I am going to be using water first for the wet on wet technique. So using my brush and only water, I'm going to paint where the grass is on both sides. For my lightest layer, I'm going to use my dark yellow. If you don't have dark yellow, you can mix yellow and brown for this next step. You want this layer to be really light, so add a lot of water. There's already water on your paper, so that should help. If it's too dark, remember, you can erase using a dry brush. I am leaving a white path for the sand. Now for my lightest layer in my palm. It might be kind of fun to go outside and look at a palm tree. You'll notice you'll see some yellows mixed in with the green. For now, I'm just going to take my yellow and paint over my firework shapes, just the lines. We need this first layer to dry, so you can use a hairdryer on a low setting and dry your paper, or just go have a snack and let it dry. I'm going to use the wet on wet technique again for my sky. So with a clean brush and a lot of water, I am just going to paint in the white areas, making sure not to touch the yellow so it doesn't bleed. For something as important as my sky, I want to make sure I have the right color. So it's a good idea to test your colors on a paper towel or a scrap piece of paper. The more pigment I have on my brush, the darker it'll be. The more water, the lighter it'll be. Our paper already has a lot of water on it, so it will show up a little bit lighter. Just remember, watercolor always dries a little bit lighter than it looks when it's wet, so don't be afraid to add some pigment. I'm also leaving some white areas to make it look sort of like clouds. Be really careful not to touch your yellow because you could risk yellow and blue mixing and making it look a little green before you're ready to paint your green palms. I'm also making sure closer to my horizon line is a little bit lighter just because I want my water to really stand out. Now with a lot of pigment and not a lot of water, I'm going to paint my horizon line. Make sure to pick up your brush before you paint right through your tree. Same thing with your umbrella. You want to paint around any objects you run into. If I just add a little bit of water under where I just painted, you'll notice it fades into the water. This is called a gradient, where it's fading from dark to light. You can try it out or just paint the whole ocean blue. This layer needs to dry also, so you can take your blow dryer and blow dry carefully on a low setting or just let it dry. Using light green or green and yellow, I am going to start building my layers of my palm. Using dark green and really small horizontal and vertical strokes, I am going to start adding the leaves to my palm. It's okay if you touch a little bit of the blue in the background, and it's okay if you cover most of that light green and yellow. I'm just adding the first layer to my palm. You can try your best to follow along, or look at a reference, or just draw any shapes that seem familiar to you for a palm tree. I'm trying to build layers and not completely cover my first two layers, so add a little bit of dark green on top, leaving some areas where you're seeing some of that light green show through. Less water on my brush makes the pigment look darker, but it also makes it look like it has sharp edges. So if you don't like how fuzzy your palms are looking, and they look more like clouds, you can take less water and a lot of pigment and draw lines coming out from that first curved line that you drew with yellow. I'm leaving the center sort of yellow and working out with my brush strokes, trying not to cover all those really nice layers that I've already laid down. You can also use this dry brush technique for grass or any of your objects. Have fun with it. I'm adding coconuts by using a lot of pigment and not a lot of water. It's okay if they're not perfect circles. And carefully, not to touch my coconuts, I am going to add another layer to my trunk so it looks a little bit darker. If you're really super careful, you can use light pressure and paint brown for the umbrella. Remember, you can always take a paper towel and clean out any space if you don't have any more room in your watercolor palette. I'm going to use pink, but remember, you can use any color for your details. It's important to keep in mind wet watercolor next to wet watercolor will mix. So I'm going to use the paint, skip, and paint technique for my umbrella. Painting, leaving a space of white paper, and then painting again. Once it's dry, then I can go back and add color. Carefully using my Sharpie, I am going to outline for my palms, just carefully around the outermost edge. It might be a little tricky to see, so you can ask a parent for help or Just try your best. It's okay if it's not perfect. Now don't be too hard on yourself if your line for your trunk isn't perfectly straight and has some bumps. If you were to look at a real palm tree, the same thing would be happening. You can use your ruler again, or just carefully outline your horizon, making sure to pick up your Sharpie and not draw through any of your objects. Then, add wavy, horizontal lines where you feel they might look best. To show that my trunk has some texture and looks a little bumpy, I'm going to add 3 lines in small groups throughout my whole trunk. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to share what you've made.